we're going to look at how to perform some basic operations with the imaginary numbers. Before we do that, I want to look at two expressions using the variable x. If I want to simplify the top expression, there's something that we use called combining like terms. That means if two terms have the exact same variables in them, we can combine those together. So my simplified expression for the top one should be 2x plus 5. In the second example, it's multiplication. So just as a quick refresher, I can multiply my two coefficients together. Then, using the rules of exponents, when I multiply variables, I need to add their exponents together. That means that expression should be 12x to the 5th power. Now when we look at the imaginary numbers, we do the same thing as we would a variable. I have 6i times the quantity negative 5 plus 7i. I is considered an imaginary number, it's not a variable. However, we still perform operations as though it was a variable. So I'm going to apply the distributive property. When I multiply my second terms together, an I times another I would be like an I squared. So even though it's imaginary numbers, we still treat them the same way we would variables as far as multiplication and addition. In my middle expression, I'm just combining like terms. I have 7i squared. No other term has the I squared in it. I have a 3i and a minus 2i. So I can combine those, and that's plus 1i, or I can just write that as plus I. And then I have two constants that I can combine. So that would be my simplified expression for the middle example. The bottom example is using the FOIL method because I'm multiplying two binomials. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute with the 3. Then I'm going to go back and distribute with my 4i. Last thing I need to look at is see if I have any like terms. I only have one term that has I squared in it. I can combine the 6i and the negative 24i, and then I have one constant. Now there is a way to simplify these further, and we'll look at that later as far as what to do when you have exponents with your imaginary numbers. So we're just going to briefly go through these three examples. The top one is the distributive property. Using my rules of exponents, that should be I to the 5th power. My middle term would become I to the 4th power, because I have to remember there really is an exponent of 1 with that I. And I don't have any like terms to combine together, so that would be my simplified expression at this point. The middle example is a binomial being squared. So I'm actually going to do the FOIL method. I'm multiplying these two binomials together. And then the last thing I need to do is combine any like terms if I have them. And I do have like terms here in the middle. My last example, I'm multiplying three things together. I could do my FOIL method first, or I could distribute first. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and distribute first. I'm going to multiply my 2i into the first set of parentheses. Now I have that new expression, and I need to multiply it to the 2 plus I. So I'm going to use the FOIL method. So my first terms would be negative 20I. My 2 outside terms would be negative 10I to the second power. My 2 inside terms. And then my last terms, I would have an I cubed. Now as I look at the 4 terms that I do have 2 that are alike, so I could combine those 2 together, which would be a positive 2I squared. And I'm just going to bring down my other terms. Now, as I mentioned before, there is something to simplify these further when there's exponents with your imaginary numbers, but we're just looking at the basic operations with addition and multiplying. These two. Why don't you try these 2 out, and then I will have answers for you to see how you did as far as your multiplication and combining like terms. And here's my simplified expressions for those 2, and I tried to color code with my distributive property, and then my combining like terms final simplified answer would be right there.